Okay.
First, and then...
Good evening, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reisch, and this is our Tuesday Night Live. Welcome. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Scott Reisch. I am a practicing criminal defense attorney here in the state of Colorado, and we started this program about 2.5 years ago during the Chris Watts early days, and it ended rather quickly with the Chris Watts show, but we've kept it going and we've expanded to putting out a daily show with a few exceptions, like today when it was just a crazy busy day doing legal work. Back in court again, finally getting to go to actual court. So we had that. That's very, very good that we're back to courts again. And obviously there's a lot of new information coming out as regards to the Dereck Chauvin trial. Obviously, Dereck Chauvin is on trial for the death of George Floyd. They are in day 2 of the trial, and it got good at a couple of spots. I'm always honest with you. I haven't seen every minute of today's testimony because, well, I had to do some of that lawyer stuff, but I've seen some highlights of it, and like to talk about the off-duty firefighter that showed up and got a little snippy with Dereck Chauvin's defense counsel. And the court admonished her a couple of times, basically to answer the question. She gets to, the attorneys ask the questions, and this is, the attorneys ask the questions and the witnesses answer them. That's it. They don't get to go on a diatribe. They don't get to interject. They don't get to say, oh, one more thing, right? Attorneys ask the questions. Prosecutor asks direct questions. What did you do? What did you see? What happened next? Right? Open-ended, non-leading questions. Defense attorneys, or whoever's, usually it's defense, but whoever's doing the cross can ask leading questions. You arrived at the scene, didn't you? Yes. You did this. You saw this. Whereupon the answers are going to be usually yes or no. If a defense attorney or any attorney is really controlling someone on cross-examination, you're going to get nothing but yes or no. I personally like to do either all yeses or all nos. So it really is good. So I like it when judges tell witnesses, no, sit down and answer the question. All right? They don't get to determine, the witness doesn't get to determine what they think is important and what is relevant. And usually when somebody does that, it usually results in a mistrial for sure. Now, the other witnesses that testified today, a lot of them were under the age of 18. And so the court still held court. There was some audio of their testimony, but the cameras were not on the witnesses because the judge was not going to allow that. And the witnesses that were called early on in the Chauvin case today, one was Miss Frazier. She was 17 when she recorded the cell phone video of Mr. Floyd's arrest that obviously brought around all the widespread attention to Mr. Floyd's death. And she gave an emotional testimony in court saying, had felt regret for not physically confronting Mr. Chauvin. And some of the stuff, I'm not really sure why that's really relevant, right? Witnesses come and testify as to what they saw. Who cares what they think they oughta, shoulda done, hindsight 2020. The fact is you didn't do it then at that time. So what you think about it now is of little relevance whatsoever. But I get it. Judges are sometimes in a situation where they need to feel like it needs to come in, right? A courtroom, yes, there's drama sometimes, but for the most part, it's give me the facts. Everybody wants to see Perry Mason moments, Most of the time, there are no Perry Mason moments. It's get the facts out. People's opinions don't matter in court. If they're an expert witness, they can testify as to what their opinions are about a particular subject that they've been qualified as a witness. But lay witnesses testifying about what they should have done, it really doesn't matter. And at a certain point, and I understand there's a lot of foundational issues that the prosecutor has to go to get these witnesses to testify, to lay the foundation, to get the videos in. But the reality of it is that at a certain point, it may become cumulative. And, we talked about the playing of the video over and over again. Is the prosecution going to desensitize the jury to that? I don't know. I still think the biggest problem Dereck Chauvin has in this particular case is going to be the fact that little smirk. And if you go back when this case broke, we talked about it. And I said, ooh, his biggest problem is that little smirk on his face where he's kind of putting his knee into Mr. Floyd's neck, and it's almost looking like he's enjoying it. That's going to be Dereck Chauvin's biggest problem. And, the defense, we started talking about yesterday's testimony, but right before the video went off, I believe it was Mr. Williams was testifying. He was the MMA fighter and had some martial arts and jiu-jitsu training and things of that nature. And he said, hey, they were doing this move on the neck, and that was to cut him out, so to speak, to apply the pressure. He called it, what was it, a swiggle or something, I think is what his name was for it. But it was, putting his pressure on the neck. And that, that neck is a sensitive area for sure. And basically, the defense attorney for Mr. Chauvin got up and said, hey, you don't really have all the details and all the training that Dereck Chauvin did to handle this particular situation. But, I think the witness held his own throughout. And, I'm a defense attorney. Let's face it. The most hated guy in Minneapolis right now is Dereck Chauvin and his attorney. His attorney is doing his job, protecting the rights, not only of Mr. Chauvin, but for all of us, right? We've talked about this before. If we let the government railroad guilty people, they will do it to innocent people as well if we allow them to do that. It's called due process. I think Chauvin's attorney has done a very, very good job. I think the prosecutors in this case so far have done a very good job. Very technical, very methodical. They're laying it out there. Frankly, after a while, it's going to, let's get to the meat and potatoes. Okay, we've seen the video. We've seen the interaction. Let's get to the important issue. Let's start talking about the medical stuff. Was it the fact that there was large substances in Mr. Floyd's body that related to the fentanyl? There were methamphetamine in his system. He had a heart condition. He was going through COVID. That's what the defense is going to try to say. Mr. Floyd, basically died of all of this medical issues and stuff, which was exacerbated by this. The prosecution needs to show that Dereck Chauvin's conduct, not all of it, not the sole reason, but contributed to the death for the lesser charge. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to get very, very interesting. I can't wait till we start getting into the battle of the experts, because experts, those are the people that can give their opinions. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see who the prosecution is going to bring in for all of their experts. Remember, the Floyd family brought in a bunch of private, high-priced forensic pathologists, and be curious to see if the state's going to use them or if they're going to rely upon their medical examiner who actually did the autopsy, but kind of changed his mind once public pressure came about and obviously the outroar as it related to George Floyd. it's going to be good. I mean, I'm telling you, this is good stuff. People like courtroom drama on TV. This is the real deal. And it's not always done in 1 hour. It's not always clean. The witnesses talk back. Sometimes the technology doesn't work when it comes to playing videos, things like that. There's electrical outages. There's always something that comes up at trial. There was also an issue, I think it was today, there was a reporter for one of the papers in town that was called to the stand. I want to know why she was taking photographs. I'm sure the court has put in very strict orders about what can be photographed, if anything at all. And those are orders of the court, and you cannot violate those orders of the court, people, or you will go to jail. It's called contempt. All right, Renee Shell, thank you very much. Thank Frank. Frank and Julie have been streaming the trial. Make sure it's up and ready to go. So we appreciate everything you all are doing, that they're doing to make sure that it all comes through. So you can actually see like real good stuff. And I know other people stream trials, but this is the way it really works in the real world. So it's good. So thanks for the super chats there. And as always said, Billy X20, thank you. Wow. Big super chat there. Thank you very much. Always appreciate super chats, but you never have to do them, but they do help when I'm going through all of these comments here in the side. All right. So let's get back here. Big stuff going on today. Can't believe it. Let's go back here. Will you guys help me if there's any great questions or trending questions here? There's a lot of people commenting tonight, which is absolutely great. Kush, Charlotte Pulaski, I thought she did well, and I think most people would get defensive when their experience is being questioned. I think referring to the firefighter, Genevieve, I think was her first name, when she started to take the stand this afternoon. She's coming back tomorrow morning, but she was admonished twice. And guess what? You don't get to snap back, and that goes to your credibility. And, a lot of these witnesses in the George Floyd case, everybody kind of wants to, hey, I'm really with George Floyd, man, and I get it. Mr. Floyd, maybe he wouldn't be passed away if he had not come in contact with Mr. Chauvin. Obviously that's what the prosecutors are going to try and say, that he would be alive but for Dereck Chauvin. The defense is going to have a difficult job basically saying, hey, he would have died that moment regardless. And that's what's going to be the issue when we get to the testimony, the body cam videos of the officers and what they purport to state, what the defense says we're going to see is that he being George Floyd consumed that fentanyl out of fear. They're going to be able to, the defense is going to be allowed to bring in other evidence of a situation where Mr. Floyd had contact with the police and he attempted to put the drugs into his mouth and attempt to swallow them so that he would not be charged with them. That is not exactly a very sophisticated technique of hiding drugs. People do that when they think that they're going to get caught or they're going to be frisked and it's going to be found and they're going to have, a charge. He was in the car, for God's sakes. Why don't you try to stuff him in the seat or something along those lines? If anyone knows anything about how dangerous fentanyl is, I don't know how many cases I've got. I think I probably have 3 cases right now where there's been a death involved and it had to do with fentanyl. Known personally people where family members thought they were taking a different pill and turned out to be fentanyl and they died, like boom, within, I think, minutes, if not, hours of taking it. That's scary stuff. And if you get something that's like 100%, pure fentanyl, you're dead. So,
I'm going to give you a photo of that.
Okay. Frank's telling me he's going to give me a photo of something here. But it's just so dangerous. So that's what the defense is going to have to argue, that, hey, this is not what it, that the drugs is what did it. And the Dereck Chauvin, that he wasn't applying pressure hard enough, long enough, 9 minutes and 29 seconds is what the, prosecution played in their opening statement. So, yeah. All right. So here's fentanyl. So apparently the heroin, that is the equivalent of one, and the right would be what you would take for fentanyl. That is
This is the amount of fentanyl that can kill you.
That's the amount of fentanyl that can kill you on the right, heroin on the left. So you start shoving pills down, even if they're cut, with other things to make them maybe not as powerful. Bad news. I'm telling you, it's bad stuff for sure. Let's see here. I see a question here by Courtney. It says, witnesses that were frustrated that day were frustrated today, unfortunately. I've only seen bits and pieces of the portions today, but my guess is that they wanted to more than likely tell further their story, how they felt. Once again, I get it, but the courtroom is not a therapy session. Courtroom, it's not there for some political agenda to say that it was wrong. All right? If you've concluded that George Floyd was murdered by Dereck Chauvin, you've made up your mind. You don't need to watch the trial. So no matter what comes out, you've already made up your mind. Or if you think that Dereck Chauvin was not responsible, that George Floyd was just basically a near homeless guy that was out doing drugs with his buddy and passing phony bills, which is the reason why they made contact, which is enough to get you arrested. Some people are like, why are they even arresting somebody for a $20 bill? Are you kidding me? There is United States Supreme Court case law that says that people could be arrested for a minor offense of as little as a seatbelt violation. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court said, you can arrest them for that, right? So I don't see why people would be upset that the officers were attempting to arrest him for passing a fake counterfeit bill. A counterfeit bill is generally, it's a federal offense, for God's sakes. And if you're the business owner, you get past a $20 bill, you're out of the product and that. Now, in this particular case, they didn't. Why? Because the store owner called the police. And I'm not trying to put anything on the store owner, but the store owner is the guy that really set this thing in motion. And he just simply said, let's get out of here. Don't come back, into my store ever again. You're passing phony bills, and not called the police. I mean, I hate to say it, none of this would have happened, right? But then maybe George Floyd had not hang out with that guys that day. Maybe if he'd gone out to look for a job. Maybe if he stayed in bed. Who knows? There's so many things that can be put out there. This, what about this? What about that? It doesn't matter. But that's why courtrooms are there. People need to make their decisions with neither passion nor prejudice. That is going to be in the jury instructions. You make your decision based upon the evidence or the lack thereof, not based upon passion or prejudice in any way. So the jury that we got selected the other day, I mean, obviously I didn't get to see what the jury looks like, but everything that I heard, and I got to watch most of the jury selection, I think these jurors are going to be fair. I think it'll be a compromise verdict if I was a betting man. Do I think it's going to be guilty to everything? I don't think so. Or to the most serious charge? I think they're going to try to compromise because they know if they don't do something, I think jurors are, they've been around the block. They know what's going on. They know that the whole world is watching. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Finkel-Wide right. Judge is going to tell a prosecution to keep their witnesses in line. And like, this is an emotional case. And I saw a lot of people saying, this is the greatest civil rights trial of our time. No, it's not. It's a criminal case. It's a criminal case about whether now former officer Dereck Chauvin, killed George Floyd? Was he responsible for the death? But for Dereck Chauvin, would George Floyd still be here today? That's what it boils down to. And this case, I think they can play the video over and over and over and over and over again. But even the prosecution's own doctor, as far as I understand it, is not going to come in and say that Dereck Chauvin killed him. It's a complication, or the pressure may have contributed in some way, but he's not going to say. It's not like it was a homicide in the sense that he was killed by a firearm or that he was killed by physically strangled in some way. So it's going to, like I said, the medical stuff is there, where we need to do it. And Beth, and see, this is, I tried to watch today, very disturbing. I couldn't handle it. I get it, but at least it's there, right? And that's why we think, because there's a lot of people that can't handle it. What do people think goes on in courtrooms, right? It's the stuff that nobody wants to talk about. I guarantee it. Most of the stuff that goes on in a courtroom, most people simply don't want to think it takes place. And then you have a high-profile case like the Chauvin matter currently going on, and people are like, oh my gosh, does this really go on in the world? Like I've said, if people knew what went on, they would crawl in the fetal position and not come out of their homes. So, all right, we've been going for about 10 minutes here. Quick little recap. My name is Scott Reisch, practicing criminal defense attorney. This is our Tuesday night live. After this, we will do our Patreon show. If you're not a Patreon, you should do so. What's the difference between our live show and our Patreon show? If you're a Patreon member, you can call in. We had a little bit of a glitch last week, but we got that fixed right away, and we had callers. So you can call in. We also do, that's right, what is that? We ask the Magic 8 Ball the question of the night. I think the Magic 8 Ball is batting 1,000. I don't think that they have been wrong thus far on any of our predictions and questions that have come up. And additionally, if you become a Patreon member, we will send you a Crime Talk trial guide, which is going to lay out all the objections, all the evidentiary foundations, so that when you're watching a trial and some, attorney gets up and starts spouting off numbers, 401, 403, 404B, you'll know what the heck that means, because it'll all be in front of you. When they say objection, lack of foundation, you can say, oh, no, Judge, they have laid the proper foundation. I have it right here on my Crime Talk trial guide. You will be an expert. Somebody suggested perhaps we should send one to Letitia Stauch, but we want to hold all people that want to play attorneys like that in real world to the same standard, so they can deal with that as well. Let's see here. I always like the interesting people that live there. Checking convictions. I just hope that justice is met here. I live in Minnesota. I do not want rioting again. I think the fences are for looks. I think the fences are for looks. Yeah, and here's the thing. I think maybe most people have realized that when you go and riot and burn down your city, that you don't do any good for your city. You're actually destroying your city's citizens' employment opportunities, their personal property. So regardless of whatever decision comes down in the Floyd case, and we're still several weeks away, if Dereck Chauvin is found not guilty and the jury says, yeah, Jordan, we feel bad, it's a tragic situation, but I'm just not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the legal standard in this case, not guilty. I guarantee you, if anyone goes and burns down the city, or tries to burn down the city, if anybody does anything by going assaulting other people, it's not going to change the verdict one iota. It's simply not going to happen. So whatever the verdict is, you're going to have to accept it. You may not like it. I assure you, I have gotten guilty verdicts over the years. I didn't like it, but you have to go through the process. And some of those cases have been reversed on appeal, right? And some of them are like, no, you know, in light of the overwhelming evidence, the conviction stands. Although there was error, it was harmless because of the overwhelming. I mean, I've had that too. So it's really, good question, Dolly, on the super chat here. With all the options, was it really necessary to put a 9-year-old on the stand? Think about it. How did those witnesses' testimony vary in any particular way, right? Oh, we're all going to the Cup Foods and we're walking across and we see the police officers and we interact and, oh, I felt really bad. I felt really bad for the guy. How is that not cumulative? Okay. If a witness says it once, okay. If another witness says it twice, okay. You get to the third witness saying the same thing over and over again, that's called cumulative. It's a waste of time. Just because, and remember, the jury should receive an instruction that says the mere number of witnesses to support a proposition does not necessarily prove the proposition. What does that mean? If I bring in 4 witnesses and say this is a green marker, after about the first witness, you'd probably say, I don't need to hear the other 3 people say it's the green marker on top, right? Real simple. But if you get somebody up there and says that, if you bring in one witness that says, at that particular time, it was a green marker, but it had a yellow on top, but you only bring in one witness, but you got 3 people say, oh, it was a green marker, right? The mere number of witnesses doesn't prove that that's what it was. They may say that one witness who said, yeah, it was a green marker, but it had a yellow cap on top, is more credible. Why? Because their ability to be where they observed what took place. I don't know. Some people have real problems with putting children on the stand. The reality of it is, if they're the only witness, fine. But if the prosecution's doing it because there's other witnesses that are available, you may have to ask yourself, why are they putting a 9-year-old on the stand to testify as to what they saw? Sympathy. They're trying to inflame the passions of the jury. That's it. Bottom line. So they can do it as long as the judge is going to do it. Now, I don't think the judge in this particular case is Judge Cahill. And frankly, I like this Judge Cahill. I don't think he's going to take a whole lot of guff from anybody. We know he's certainly not going to take any guff from the witnesses, even if they are a paramedic, as what took place this afternoon. Basically, when the judge is admonishing your witness, okay, your witness isn't helping you. That's it. Just answer the question. Just answer the question for both sides. For both sides. So yeah. Okay, Beth, I hear you as Terry. Race was not brought in as a motive by the prosecution. Quantum wannabe. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's no evidence anywhere to say that Chauvin did anything as it related to race. I don't think they can say that's any motive. They don't have to prove motive in any way. I think the thing that's going to hurt and probably bring Chauvin down, if his expert witnesses don't kind of get him over the finish line, so to speak, it's going to be that kind of little smirk when he's there putting his knee into Dereck Chauvin's neck and everyone's saying, get off, and he's just ignoring it. He's not even looking at him. Looking at Mr. Floyd, that was. Let's see. They shouldn't be allowed to gesture. Let's see here. Jenny X, the smirk and the hand in the pocket. Yep. That's going to be kind of the disregard, and you notice because it's not a defense. It's not like they're saying, oh, self-defense, it was reasonable force. you can never use excessive force when there is no real force. He was handcuffed. He was down. I don't know. I mean, obviously that's going to be the biggest problem. And I'm sure, Dereck Chauvin's attorney, Mr. Eric Nelson, I'm sure he's had these conversations. I'm sure that this has kept him up at night and probably wishes that he didn't have to deal with that particular fact. This case wouldn't even, probably be here. But he's got to do it. That's what defense attorneys do. They deal with all the good facts. It's not like politics. That's why I can't stand these people on the TVs when they talk about. They only talk about their one good fact, and they completely ignore the reality of all the other facts. And they act like they don't exist, and we don't have to talk about them. And if you talk about that, no. And we've talked about this. I know we've talked about this in our Patreon, is that as an attorney, you are always analyzing the case and the facts, and your opinion is going to change based upon the facts as they come in. I've had cases where I thought, oh man, this is going to be a great case, and then something changes. Like the witness that we thought had disappeared miraculously shows up. Ooh, bad fact. Then we need to adjust. And in this particular case, Mr. Nelson, the attorney for Dereck Chauvin, has probably had these same conversations thinking, man, if I just didn't have to deal with that knee on the neck. Man, if I just didn't have to deal with that smirk. Man, if I just didn't have to deal with his hands in the pocket. And all those people around that clearly thought that Mr. Floyd was in bad shape, and he ignored it. I mean, do you think that Dereck Chauvin would have liked to have taken that day back? Probably, right? Do you think, looking back, hindsight 2020, that instead of 9 minutes and 29 seconds, that once he was handcuffed and he thought that he needed medical attention, why? I mean, just called paramedics. It was about who was, the bigger dog on the street that day. That's what that was. I'm a tough dog. No, I'm a tougher dog. That's what that was about. And in this particular case, it was videotaped. I mean, think about it as well. And this is what body cams, cameras, I remember 15 years ago, there were no body cams. If you recorded police officers, they would cite you with interference for conducting their job. And finally, the courts had to say, yeah, unless you're like in an officer's face when he's trying to arrest somebody, you can record the incident. You're outside. And if you believe it or not, there are still people out there that think that police should not be allowed to be videotaped in the performance of their jobs, right? I mean, unbelievable. But here we have people with their cell phones, body cams. If this case had taken place, and I understand why so many people are upset, and I agree. The George Floyd case, I can't necessarily have had a case where somebody died in a situation like that, but I've had more cases over the years where my clients swore up and down the cops, for lack of a better term, kicked the shit out of them, roughed them up, dragged them out through the car door, put the knee in the back, put the billy club in the back of their head, hit them, whack them. All that crap that people said went on, and the police were like, oh, that didn't happen. And then you talk to the police afterwards, they're out drinking, having a couple of beers. Oh, yeah, we showed them how things used to be run on the street. We didn't have any problems when we were allowed to do that kind of stuff, right? The George Floyd stuff, that's what I have been dealing with as a defense attorney for 25 years. And thank God we have video cameras, halo cameras, so that people can actually see what takes place out there. And if you're a good cop, that body cam is going to more than likely help you, save you from official misconduct claims. Turn it on. Now the big issue is, I had my body cam, but I forgot to turn it on. Or all 6 of the officers just happened to have a malfunction at the same time of their body cam. Yeah. that is borderline corruption. Okay. Things just don't happen like that unless there's some sort of electromagnetic pulse that, wipes out the entire country's electrical supply or something. But to say that all the officers' cameras all went out, really? Jan, and the prosecutor rushes to find the smart clip. Yeah. Oh, and that was right. It was the shimmy. That's what Mr. Williams, I think, was talking about. He was the officer. It was the shimmy move. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. That's right. Thank you. See, that's what I love about YouTube. Everybody, I mean, not everybody. We have such smart subscribers and people. Thank you. I should have gone through that sooner. I'm sorry. Got a little distracted. All right. Wow. Can you believe another 10, 15 minutes? Question. Have you ever had cases where you felt like defending your clients potentially put you or your family in danger? No. And I've mentioned this story before. I had a homicide case where my client was accused of killing somebody that they thought was kind of a bad dude and to worry about it. And I was walking out to the parking lot in the next row over were the family members, and they were kind of driving their cars. I was walking. I remember I drove a car that I really liked that day, and so I parked it way out at the end of the parking lot, and so no one would hit the door during my car. And as I was driving away, they looked at me, I looked at them, and the one guy, used his little finger to, simulate a gun. So I get back to the office, I called the DA, said, hey, just tell the family I'm just doing my job. Don't do anything stupid. That's just going to create more problems. DA's like, okay, yeah, I'll look into it. And then the DA calls me back. Hey, so like dead guy, he's kind of connected to some really bad dudes. And if you'd like, we can have officers escort you, from your car to the courtroom. Like, okay. No, I think I'll be okay because I'm not going to let them see that I was being intimidated. Like, ooh, I'm scared. Ooh. And we ultimately got a not guilty on that homicide case. So no, I'm not worried about it. I think most people get that, defense attorneys, you are a necessary part in the cog of justice. Defense attorneys, and a lot of people don't think so, but they are out there not just defending the client, they're defending everybody's rights under the Constitution on a daily basis. Okay? All those cases, those criminal cases that deal with where the Supreme Court says you can't do that. That's illegal. The government overreached. Who do you think raises those issues? Do you think it's some super smart guy that does appellate work, that works at some big law firm, and when a case goes to Supreme Court, they say, hey, we want to take your case. Can we take your case? We'd love to take your case to the Supreme Court. No, it's guys like me, little criminal defense lawyers going around every day saying, no, government, you can't do that. You can't do that. Because the government does what everybody does when they're in power. They always try to get more. Nobody in the government ever gets up and says, at least while they're there, no one ever gets up and says, ooh, I think we have too much power here in the government today. The prosecutor's office, ooh, we're looking at this motion to suppress. Wow, Scott's got a really good point here. That's all right. We know that this judge that we're in front of is a complete hack for the prosecution because he used to be one, and there's never been a police officer he didn't believe. So although, it looks a little weird, we're going to take our chances with the judge. Yeah. And the judge poo-poos it and says, of course. And the defense attorney objects, and you go to trial and you lose because the illegally obtained evidence was allowed to come into evidence, and you go through the process. You don't go riot. You don't go beat people up. You say, fine, we'll go to the next level. We'll go to the appellate courts. And there is nothing, I tell you, that when an appellate decision comes down on a case that you lost and the trial court judge is reversed, Why? Because little old me said, Judge, you can't do that. Judge, you're not permitted to do that. Police officer, DA, you're not permitted to do that. It's the best feeling ever. Now, I'd rather win, but if you can't win, better to win on appeal. So every time people say, oh, those defense attorneys, or, oh, Dereck Chauvin's defense attorney is out there, and, why are we doing this? Everybody knows he's guilty. Look, he killed a man. No, it's called due process. He's protecting everyone's rights. So, Mr. Nelson, my hat is off to you, okay? You're in there doing a very tough job. My hat is off to you. And although many people won't realize it, he is protecting everyone's rights out there. So, and, the odds are he's probably going to lose. Dereck Chauvin will more than likely be convicted of something. But that's the way it is. What? About what?
Rioting all-star.
Oh, okay. Plug Power says there's going to be riots. Wendy, let's see here. Oh, man, can you believe it? Hey, let's take a quick recess. Can we play that quick commercial there? Please go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, sign up for a background subscription service. You'll be happy you did. If there's anyone out there you were ever curious about what was in their background, now is the time to do it. If you're going to get involved with somebody, now is the time to do it. When you go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, you put in the name, literally millions of public records are searched, and a report is generated. And it's going to give you a report. If they have multiple social media accounts, you're going to find it. If they have multiple phone numbers, multiple email addresses, it's going to be found. And more importantly, you're going to get information regarding criminal history. Hopefully the person you're searching has none whatsoever. But if it's there, it's going to be found. You're going to get everything you'd want to know, whether you're going into business or whether you're going into a personal relationship. You're going to be able to find out the information you want to know. So go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, sign up today. You'll be happy you did. All right. And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us through the little break. I'm telling you, want to check somebody out, go to CrimeTalkSearch.com. You'll be happy you did. Maybe a little surprised sometimes, too, what you find out, but you should do it. Cheryl had a good comment here. These witnesses have been very hostile and disrespectful of the court. And like I said, I'm not going to say that I saw every testimony because I had to be in a hearing this morning that took a little longer than expected. So I didn't get to watch it all and then come back and try to, get a bunch of stuff done. But yeah, I mean, the judge is not going to take that. And if the prosecutor's smart, what those witnesses do on the stand, I mean, the attorneys that are calling them are kind of responsible for how they present. But for a firefighter to get disrespectful and rude and combative, I mean, that's not their spot. Just answer the damn question. And if you don't like it on cross-examination, wait. The prosecution's going to get redirect. So they're not helping the case. They're simply not helping the case. Let's see here. Yeah, Lynette says, I like Nelson. I just wish he was a little more aggressive. Yeah, maybe. I mean, here's the thing. Everybody's got their own style. I've seen some people that are very calm, methodical. Some people a little more dramatic, you could say. But you got to do what works for you in the courtroom, and it'll come off. If you're trying to do something, be somebody you're not, the juries will think you're faking it. If they think you're faking it, guess what? They're not going to do it. It comes down to trust. The jury may not like Chauvin, but you want them to trust the attorney for Chauvin. That's just the way that is. Billy X20, thank you very much. Another super chat. Love your experience. Helping us all the way along. Appreciate it. When will the experts be there? I would guess they're probably going to start real soon. I mean, we spent the last, I guess really it was only one day going over the crime scene. And, the prosecution's going to do what they want. And let me just tell you, from somebody who's had to sit through a lot of prosecution cases, the part of it, most of it is boring, particularly in cases like this, where it's on video. How many times have we got to watch it? Okay? Frankly, I mean, you can do what you want, but I think I'd play it once and leave begging for more. And then you can maybe come up with something at the end. We did something recently, and I'm not saying it was, I don't know whose idea it was, but I didn't do the technical stuff. Frank, the hardest working man in show business, did it. But we had all these videos, and at the end of it, we took out all this all the little snippets from all the little videos and said, boom, played it. It was 31 seconds of saying what the theory of the case was. Boom, it just went off. 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 You know, they could do something like that versus, you know, just the whole what happened again. Tell me, what did you see? How did that make you feel? Objection, relevance. How the witness felt is of no relevance in court. What element does the witness's feelings have to do with anything? Nothing at all. A lot of people won't like that, but guess what? Nobody cares about your feelings in court. It's just the way it is. Let's see here. They need to take the emotions out of it and just get to the facts. Back to country. That's what I'm saying. Nobody cares. This isn't a political thing. Nobody cares. I mean, unless you're in there and the issue is, was there serious bodily injury, like your leg was cut off? You know, you maybe get a couple of questions. So how does it feel without having a leg, right? But how you feel, save that for sentencing. I don't care how you feel in court. That's not what it's about. It's a question of, did it happen or not? Who's responsible or not? We don't make this. That's what separates the court system. That's why everybody hates lawyers, right? I get accused of it all the time. You're emotionless. And I'm like, hey, I've got a heart. I keep it in a jar of formaldehyde right next to my bed, okay? But at the end of the day in court, feelings don't matter. Bottom line, it's about facts. It's about proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Is it a tragedy that George Floyd is deceased? Yes. The question at issue is, who's responsible for it? Was it Dereck Chauvin for putting his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds? Or was it George Floyd trying to eat a bunch of fentanyl, who wasn't exactly the epitome of good health? Would that be enough to kill him at that literally moment? It's not the first time that's happened in the world, ladies and gentlemen. But think about it. Who cares what a witness feels like? I don't care how they felt. I'm sure it was traumatizing. I'm sure the cops feel terrible about it now. But nobody cares. Save it for sentencing if there's a conviction. All right. Let's see. I have another question here before. Man, I can't believe it goes by so fast. Agree, Scott. Where were they allowed to ask how this event affected? I don't know. I would expect an objection. Relevance. And relevance is, think of relevance as, who cares? Judge, that's no relevant to this court case, right? Relevance. What element does it go to prove or disprove that the prosecution has to prove? I don't care that the people had to stay up at night. I don't care that they were traumatized by seeing somebody die in front of them. It's too bad. I'm sorry. But let's face it, we're adults. Welcome to life. Bad things happen in life. They've always happened. They're happening right now as we speak, and they're going to continue to happen. And it's going to affect people emotionally, but not in court. That's why attorneys get accused of it. I got distracted. They get accused of being jerks and insensitive. It's because they don't care. In the courtroom, it doesn't care. They just don't care, particularly in a criminal courtroom. If anything, yeah. So anyway, but they did call paramedics, and paramedics went to the wrong place initially. I mean, those are all things that, the defense could bring up. It was a comedy of errors. The prosecution is going to keep coming back. It wasn't an error. It was now former officer Chauvin putting his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Scott, why is it listed homicide on both autopsies as opposed to accidental? Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was not originally a homicide. The medical examiner there in Minneapolis changed it weeks after his initial report, after a private autopsy was done, and they said absolutely it was asphyxiation. Murder simply means they have to the cause and the manner of death. Cause of death. Was it an accident? Was it a suicide? Was it a homicide? Simply that they died by somebody else. Homicide, accident. I think I got them all. And then the manner of death, was it strangulation, asphyxiation, gunshot? That's the manner of death. But if they say that it is just because they classify it as a homicide, doesn't necessarily mean that somebody that's accused of that is guilty of that, right? If somebody comes in and says, oh yeah, a dead guy was shot point blank in the chest by another guy, they were having a duel, and manner of death, homicide caused by that of another person, the cause and manner of death would be gunshot wound, okay? But they go to court, and the person accused of it is found not guilty. Why? Because it was self-defense. So just because the coroner makes a determination as to that particular outcome doesn't mean that that's the law of the land, so to speak. It's not. It's his opinion, okay? And his opinion can be wrong. I've had competing coroners. You had the prosecution, you had the defense coroner look and say, nope, they're each right. So don't get hung up on what the coroner said. They're limited in their classifications of what they can do. Undetermined, suicide, natural causes, accident, like you fell into a manhole or something, or homicide. That's it. What are they going to say? I mean, they have evidence, they have testimony. Some guy's on his neck. Okay. They originally find it wasn't that. And then the coroner changed his report. Sustained, counselor. So don't get too hung up on what the coroner says. Coroners, their opinions, that's their job. They classify it. Then the prosecutor goes forward and says, okay. And the defense says, the whole part in the charging documents, it says that the defendant on or about this date and place charged unlawfully means without legal permission or justification, took the life of John Doe, after deliberation, blah, 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 on this date in violation of the statute. Okay. I mean, just like my little example of the mere number of witnesses, the mere number of people saying that it is a homicide doesn't make it an illegal homicide, right? Just because the prosecutor's saying it's a homicide. You have the coroner saying it's homicide. And you got the defendant saying, it wasn't my fault. The guy died of natural causes. Or, wasn't my fault. I was defending myself. So don't get too hung up on what the coroner determines, particularly the state coroner in this particular case, because he changed. And one could argue reasonably that he changed because the city was burning down. All right, let's take a look at this. Solely, and I don't remember hearing this in the evidence. George Floyd had a pulse in the ambulance, but I think I'll wait to hear from the paramedics who were in there. I don't think they've testified yet, but I could be wrong. Not immediately call for medical. I am lost. I do not understand why the cops did not immediately call for medical. I am lost. Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe we'll hear from Dereck Chauvin about that. You know, and I hate to, gosh, because when I say stuff, sometimes people get mad. Listen, the police officers have a duty to protect people, right? When somebody is in the care of the police, they have a responsibility to make sure that person stays healthy, right? It's just the way it is. Just like, you hear cases where people go to prison and they get assaulted and things like that. And if it looks like the people failed to protect them, the deputies failed to protect them, they get sued. So, like I said, I'm not trying to condone what the officers did or didn't do in this particular situation. There's a lot of, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Hindsight is 20/20. But, what would have been best that they'd called? Yeah. Have they dealt with it? Had they dealt with a situation like this? A guy who is down the street, potential drug user, passing bills. I mean, let's face it. Resources are limited. I'm not saying they should have. I'm just saying, what is the officer thinking out here? Oh, I got another guy, freaking crackhead. Okay, we're going to tie up the ambulance for a real emergency for some guy who's, just high. I mean, I don't know. Well, maybe we'll never know unless Dereck Chauvin testifies. But, like I said, hindsight's 20/20. You have to look at not, how would you have handled things in a perfect world, but how did they handle them at that time with the information that they had? And that's not that's what attorneys do. That's what attorneys do. Well, see, Carol, I hate to say, you've already made up your mind. I've tried to go into the testimony, and I'm going to try to watch as much as I can, particularly tomorrow. I'm going to try to watch nearly all of it if I can. And because I've tried to take the position of, I don't know all of the facts. I don't know all the evidence. I don't know what's coming on. I look forward to a lot of the evidence, but I don't know. I mean, I will, when it's done and the closing arguments are done and it's submitted, I'll tell you how I think I would probably consider it. My gut feeling at this point is I think, Chauvin's going to be convicted of something unless the expert witnesses that say, hey, Dereck Chauvin was doing everything that the city trained him to do. And you can't blame Dereck Chauvin. You got to blame the city. And guess what? I mean, I would embrace that whole $27 million thing. I mean, I'd be like, there's the guilty party, the city. They're the ones that trained my client, Mr. Chauvin. That's what I'd be saying if I was Mr. Nelson. I'd embrace that $27 million. There's the guilty party. Clearly, if they weren't such cheap bastards, maybe they would have trained these officers a little better. And now they're paying for it. $27 million. Because the only way people change their conduct is when it gets too expensive not to. Bottom line. Let's see here. It's, do you know if I don't know if he's died on the scene. How do you get past moral dilemma with guilty clients? This is May Glove. It's really easy, May. It's called the United States Constitution. I couldn't sleep at night if I just rolled over and didn't defend my client because a bunch of people thought that he was guilty. Couldn't do that. I should go get a completely different profession if I couldn't do that. All right. And let's think, come on. Is anybody that naive to think that Scott Reisch is a criminal defense attorney in 25 years, has never had a guilty client? Oh my gosh. Yes. I jokingly say that my law practice only takes innocent clients. Okay. It's a joke, ladies and gentlemen. But guess what? Oftentimes what somebody is charged with is not necessarily what they did. Maybe severe charges, less severe charges. That means the defense, that means the process is doing their job. I get that question all the time. How can you represent guilty people? As I talked about before, it's easy to represent guilty people because you're not in there saying, I like what my client did. He's a swell guy. No, you're saying, Judge, our Constitution the bedrock of our constitutional republic, our Republican form of government that we have. Representative equals Republican form of government, not Republican Party. Our Republican form of government, we have representative government. The basic building blocks are our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And if you love the Constitution, and you should, people come to the United States in droves, willing to die to try and get here because of the protections afforded them in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So every time a criminal defense attorney gets up there and represents somebody, they're not saying I am condoning, I am supporting everything that they have done. I have had clients that I have been absolutely disgusted by the acts that they have done, but I have done everything I could in my power to make sure that they received due process afforded not only to them, but everyone under the United States Constitution. And if you think that a someone accused of a crime somehow is not afforded the decency of representation or a fair trial, you can head to China, head to Russia. I can probably think of a couple Central American, South American countries where they'll be like, hey, come on down. Yeah, we don't want people to have those rights. And guess what? It's always the people that ask that question, I swear, that come to me someday and say, my family member has got a problem, Scott. I was wondering if you could help me. I'm really embarrassed by this. I know I asked you those questions about how can you represent guilty people, but I may have somebody. Oh, it's you. Oh, you're not just asking for a friend? Oh, okay. Because in your life, ladies and gentlemen, whether it's a family member or a friend, is going to need a criminal defense attorney. And probably when you least expect it the most. All right? So every time somebody goes in there's no moral dilemma whatsoever with a guilty client. None whatsoever. I will represent the worst of the worst to make sure that they get a fair trial. Bottom line. Question. Do you think Chauvin will testify? If he does, can the prosecutor bring up his past disciplinary issues? How does that work? I have no idea whether Dereck Chauvin will testify or not. And frankly, his attorneys may not even know at this point. They've probably prepped him to try and decide whether he should testify. But it's going to be a game time decision. That decision does not have to be made literally until the prosecution has presented all of their evidence and they have rested. If the defense is going to call witnesses, the defendant does not usually have to testify until the very end, if he chooses to at all. And he has a presumption of innocence under that pesky Fifth Amendment. The judge is actually going to read the law to the jury and say, guess what? The defendant is never compelled to testify. You cannot use his silence against him in any way. Personally, I think I've probably won more trials when the defendant does not testify, because then it goes of looking at all of the evidence or the lack thereof in the case to simply, do we like the defendant? So the question then is, can the prosecutor bring up past disciplinary issues? Not normally. In this particular situation, Mr. Chauvin has a right to be tried on this case and this case alone. He doesn't get to bring in what they refer to as 404B evidence, because that's wrong. You can't use evidence for propensity evidence. I don't care if you are a habitual car thief. You should have a right to be tried on this particular charge. Let's say you had 6 prior motor vehicle thefts. On number 7, you're like, you know what? I pled guilty to all those previous car thefts because I did those. But this one I didn't do, and I'm not pleading guilty to it. Those other 6 convictions should not come in. If someone has a felony conviction, depending on the jurisdiction, the rules vary. But if they have a felony conviction, it can be brought in, not to say that they're a bad person, but you may consider that to consider their truthfulness. Okay? Now, if Dereck Chauvin were to get up on the witness stand and say, I've never done anything wrong, I'm a police officer who always followed the rules, never did anything wrong. Then Dereck Chauvin would open up prior disciplinary issues in that regard. So hopefully I answered your question there, Chandra. See if there's any other things here. Pat, thank you very much. Super chat. Wow, look at that. Can you believe it's already an hour? Wow. All right. Hey, we're going to end it here. We're going to go to our Patreon. If you haven't joined a Patreon, please do so. I mean, it's little as what? $5 a month is the lower end. The more money you spend, the more free, cool stuff that you get. Isn't your... Oh, hold on. Tim Cass Pod... All of you cult members can't hide. Your hate shines through, even when the topic isn't your master. Tim Cass Podcast, I have no idea what you're talking about whatsoever. But hey, if you join the Patreon, you can call in and we can talk about it for sure. I don't know what cult you think people are following. The activated Chauvin has 14 formal complaints, 2 discipline. I agree. Dereck Chauvin is the epitome of bad cop. He's the kind of bad cop that I have been fighting against as a criminal defense attorney for the last 25 years. I'm not going to dispute that. He's one of those guys that when you see him, he's a punk. But he thinks he can get away with it because he always has. And in this particular station, he had a really crappy day, and he may pay with it with his freedom. I'm not saying Chauvin's a good guy. I'm just saying give him a fair trial, right? So if there is a conviction, then it doesn't come back, and we have to do it all over again. Let's see. I don't believe officers carry Narcan. Let's talk about how many people Chauvin has killed as a cop. Just Jess. Okay. Just how many other people do you know that he's actually killed? Other than allegedly George Floyd, which he's on trial for. We'll give him the presumption of innocence like we do everybody, unless and until they are convicted in a court of law or plead guilty. That's the strangest super chat I've ever seen. I agree. And Tim Cat Podcast, yes, you do. Okay. I agree. I mean, Chauvin is not the exact epitome. Chauvin's the kind of guy that I hate. Chauvin's the guy that makes all the good cops look bad because they won't get rid of him. And you saw the way those cops, the other 3 that showed up on the scene, they knew who was in charge. They knew they weren't going to question Chauvin. He was in charge. He was the guy. And frankly, I'm a little surprised that the others are even charged for basically standing around. But, sometimes when politics gets into law, that's what happens. But inviting Mr. Means to come on here, he holds grudges by the looks of it. Oh, Sam, don't worry about it. I think we can handle Mr. Means. I'm not worried about that. All right. Let's see here. All right, we're done here tonight. And if you'd like to join us on our podcast and Timcast podcast, you are more than happy to join us. And you can even call in. You can come in first. Just become a Patreon member. There you go. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see all our Patreons here in a few minutes. We'll send out that link.